Welcome to the first look. I'm your host Guns, and today we're going to take a look at the Stellaris Distant Stars Story Pack DLC. Now, Stellaris is a game that I've put a couple of hundred hours into with friends through multiplayer and single player, and it's probably been one of my favorite, quotation marks, cheap 4X RTS, and it is more of an RTS than it is turn-based, especially compared to some other 4X games out there like Sid Meier's. Everything's in real time with ship combat and whatnot, which is probably one of my favorite things. So if you've never heard of Stellaris and you like RTS and 4X games, this might be a real winner for you. But today what we're looking at is the new DLC, the Distant Stars Story Pack. So the first thing that we have to talk about for the Distant Stars Story Pack is the price. It's $10, which is nothing if you already own Stellaris and several others of the DLCs. But what about those of you that are looking to get into the game currently that don't have Stellaris or any of the DLCs? Well, that's the bad news. If you were to buy Stellaris today and all of the relevant DLCs that change gameplay or add to gameplay, it would be $125, which is probably the toughest selling point that I've ever had anybody to look at. Would you like to be introduced to our game? Sure. Okay, well, for the current state of the game and its best state of the game, it's $125. Now, if you bought the game when it first came out, and over time, if you've slowly purchased each DLC as released, it's not so much spread out over 2 years. Almost $60 every year-ish, roughly $5 a month. And out of the 200 plus hours that I've gotten out of Stellaris, that $5 a month definitely feels worth it in my opinion. But to try to bring this up to somebody else is actually pretty hard, which is one of the things that I want to talk about before we get to the Distant Stars Story DLC pack. They really need to kind of trim the branches on this game in terms of a selling point. Paradox Interactive really needs to, I think, condense down all of the DLCs, perhaps from Apocalypse all the way back to the base game, condense it down into $40 for all of that, because Apocalypse was massively changing to the game itself, and things like the Distant Stars Story Pack just add some cool, new, neat, additional things to the game that aren't necessary, but as somebody that plays the game a lot, you would want those things because they're definitely new experiences. And in my opinion, the Distant Stars Story Pack adds some of the best experiences. So just kind of warning you up front that to get into Stellaris and to really experience the game, you are going to need the base game and all of the DLCs, and that's currently $125 for all the DLCs that change the gameplay and add additional story details. But as far as the Distant Stars Story Pack itself, how is it if you're already playing Stellaris? Do you think it's worth the $9.99? After about 2 full games and experiencing some of the new stories that there were to deliver, some of them were really, really neat as some of the original ones, because it obviously keeps all the original ones and just adds additional, and it changes how some things work within the system, like more multi-starred type of systems. There are new unique resources and stories kind of behind the reason why you get these unique resources on these particular planets, which is actually really nice to see. There are also new kinds of events with different kinds of massive creatures that you find on planets. There are new anomalies that you discover that can really lead you on some kind of crazy story or quest jumping types of scenarios that tend to be like really long distance things that you follow throughout the entire early to mid game in some cases, depending on how quickly you're researching things. So adding a lot of these new things actually adds a lot more interesting things to discover inside the game of Stellaris itself, because to me the best experiences of Stellaris are when we have these new anomalies, because I feel like your civilization, and not just anomalies, but new events and new creatures and all that stuff, because in my opinion the best part of Stellaris is the story that's told about your civilization through these events, and adding all these additional events that can happen in-game, and resources and creatures and star systems, just increases the uniqueness that your civilization can have compared to somebody else's. And in my opinion, I think where this shines the most is in multiplayer, which is where I've spent most of my 200 hours inside Stellaris, is the multiplayer, experiencing it with friends, where one of my friends gets an anomaly or an event that I wanted, and I get one that they wanted, and so our civilizations become further separated from each other and more unique from each other just based on the experiences that they have, and it kind of becomes a shared experience type of system as that goes on. So, is Stellaris The Distant Stars DLC worth it? In my opinion, if you already have Stellaris, absolutely. The Distant Stars adds more story-based content to anomalies, events, resources, creatures, enemies throughout the game that you'll randomly encounter, and that just adds to the depth and uniqueness that you feel through the game, and I think it's definitely worth it for $10 because you're definitely going to get more than 10 hours worth of time out of it. Is this worth it to the person that doesn't own Stellaris, though, that hasn't played Stellaris, that might have been interested in it? That's a really hard judgment call for me to make. In general, I love Stellaris and I think it's good, but I pay the $125 for it personally, yes. But $125 is a seriously steep asking price for somebody that's never played the game and maybe only seen screenshots or some videos. Which is why, again, I think Paradox Interactive should definitely look at a way of squashing down all the DLCs into a single package. Maybe give them Apocalypse to the beginning of the game for somewhere between $40 to $50, and then start adding on, because Apocalypse was a huge game changer to the Stellaris game itself and the universe as we go forward. That is going to do it for this episode of The First Look. I was your host, Guns. You can follow me on Twitter at 3GUNSDOWN, down in the link below. You can also watch me live over at twitch.tv/GUNZGAMES. You can support me on Patreon, here on YouTube, or anywhere on Twitch. Of course, all the options are there for you, and it's always appreciated. You can also support this video and the First Look series by liking the video, sharing it with your friends, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications, all of which are extremely annoying, and I hate the fact that you have to do all of that. Why couldn't it be a simple user interface like just pressing a button? God damn.